Spirit of place, Tyntesfield. Hypocrisy illustrated by architecture. Set on the rolling land between Bristol and the coast, Tyntesfield is one of those houses built on exploitation that amounted to slavery and given a gloss of respectability and even philanthropy by the religious pretensions of the family who built it. The land on which the house and its estate were developed was originally part of the Tynte family estate. When that family moved elsewhere, it was eventually bought in the mid-19th century by William Gibbs, and he began the transformation of a Georgian mansion into a late Gothic masterpiece that's now Grade 1 listed. Described as a businessman, religious and aesthetic philanthropist, William Gibbs had a somewhat dubious business history based on exporting wool from England to Spain. His childhood was in fact divided between Spain and Britain, and after some time he joined his father and his elder brother George Henry in a new London trading company, Anthony Gibbs and Son, becoming a partner in 1813. Eventually, from about 1832, the business was constantly in profit, but it really boomed about 10 years later when his brother George Henry inherited a fortune from his wife, and that allowed him to pay what still remained of their father's debts. And then within a few months he died and William became head of Anthony Gibbs and Sons. At the same time, his firm signed contracts with the government of Peru for the company to be the sole importers of guano, that's bird droppings to most of us, to Britain and to a lot of Europe. And during the 1850s he could make as much as £13 million a year in today's terms from a monopoly that covered most of the world. Now, along with millionaire status came 7 children with his wife Blanche, who he married when he was nearly 50, by the way, and an almost messianic commitment to the idea of restoring Catholic ritual and practices to the Church of England. Now, his religion led to some local and lots of religious philanthropy in this country, but it doesn't seem to have prompted any compassion for the imported Chinese coolies, as they became known, slaving away on remote islands off Peru, whom the Peruvian government now admits were treated as slaves. They were forced to work 17 hours a day with never a day off under very hot, dry and dusty conditions. Labour laws that applied to other workers didn't protect them, and their masters could do pretty much as they pleased with them. Black British slaves were employed to whip or flog any worker who didn't pull his weight, and severe misdeeds were punished by tying the miscreant to a buoy in the sea. They were paid just 1 Peruvian real per day and a small allowance of rice, and when the workers threatened to revolt, the Peruvian authorities liaised with the British to import opium to quieten them down. The dust from the guano caused the miners' lips and noses to bleed, producing diseased eyes and resulting in many of them dying from respiratory diseases. The Chinese had to survive on a meagre diet of dried meat, hard bread and maggot-infested rice, while having to manually mine 100 barrows full of guano per day. And even amongst those who somehow managed to stay disease-free, a large number chose suicide, overdosing on opium, hanging themselves by their braces or throwing themselves off high cliffs into the ocean below. Very few of the 30,000 workers managed to complete the full 5-year term of their contract. But they made the Gibbs family very rich, and Tyntesfield is one result. it's very church-like, and it suggested that Gibbs' piety was most strongly expressed in the refurbishment of Tyntesfield between 1863 and 65. He was one of those who saw his religion as an effective substitute for proper financial assistance, and his concern for the poor in his parish of Paddington near his London home led him to build a new church for them. Wasn't that nice? William Gibbs died in Tyntesfield on the 3rd of April 1875, and the estate remained with the Gibbs descendants until the death of his great-grandson George Richard Lawley Gibbs, the 2nd Baron Wraxall, in 2001. Tyntesfield, as an estate, could no longer financially support itself, and the Baron left it to all 19 of his father's descendants. And it took a campaign run by Save Britain's Heritage to raise £3 million from the public, added to a government grant grant from the National Heritage Memorial Fund of 17.4 million, and more grants and private donations for the National Trust to buy it in June 2002. Of course, this left the family with more than 20 million to share amongst themselves. Now, the architectural style selected for the rebuilding by Gibbs was a version of Gothic that combined many reinventions of the medieval style, and that choice was influenced heavily by William and Blanche Gibbs' Anglo-Catholic beliefs. Their wing of the Anglican Church advocated the view that the revival of the medieval Gothic style represented a return to the faith and social structure of the Middle Ages. Gibbs, it seems, was a big fan of feudalism. The completion of the mansion's chapel accentuated the building's feel of a medieval monastery, and William Gibbs commissioned John Gregory Crace to redesign and decorate the principal rooms at Tyntesfield using gilded panelling, woodwork, moulding and chimney pieces, all in the Gothic style. The house is built of 2 types of Bath stone, and it's highly picturesque. It bristles with turrets and an elaborate roofline. The facades have many Gothic main windows along with Tudor oriel windows, and the interior is surprisingly light as a result. The total cost of redevelopment to create a house with 23 main bedrooms and another 24 for the servants came to about £70,000. In the mid-Victorian era. That's more than £7 million in today's money. But of course that was just equivalent to 18 months of gross profits from Gibbs' business interests, and he soon bought 2 adjoining estates, and at its peak the Tyntesfield estate spanned over 6,000 acres from Portishead in the north to south of the valley in which the house itself sits. And Gibbs' final addition to Tyntesfield was that Gothic chapel. But his Anglo-Catholicism and local control freakery was not popular, and the combined opposition from the local vicar of the church in Wraxall and the church's patron led to the Bishop of Bath and Wells decreeing he would not sanction the consecration of Tyntesfield Chapel through fears it would take away power from the local population and put it fully into Gibbs' hands. However, this rich family have not only left a strange but darkly fascinating house behind, but also some rather special gardens. The Gibbs family created an arboretum with a collection of specimen trees brought from all over the world, and Tyntesfield is also home to many so-called champion trees. They're significant because of their height or age or girth or some other quality. The walled kitchen garden provided fruit and veg for the Tyntesfield estate from the 1860s onwards, and the working buildings surrounding the walled garden, the potting shed, the tool shed and apple store, are still used for their original purpose, and the gardens, of course, are cultivated by National Trust volunteers these days, and they make a very good job of it. The lovely orangery dominates the gardens, which are tucked well away from the main house, It was virtually derelict in 2002 when the National Trust took over, but thanks to careful restoration work by professional conservators and architectural stone conservation students from City of Bath College, it's been returned to its former glory, and there are actually orange trees growing in there, something you very rarely see. Now, this is now one of the National Trust's star properties, and rightly so, as it gives such a disturbing insight into the arrogance and hollow piety of a Victorian businessman. The house reflects the iron-bound religious convictions of a family that wanted to drag society backwards to an era where the landed gentry ruled and the serfs did as they were told, on pain of censure by both landlord and a Catholic God with little sympathy. Little surprise that such people were unconcerned that their wealth was produced by the exploitation and torture of people they would no doubt regard as heathens and unworthy of their consideration. We need reminding that such people exist.